wearing his reading glasses, and he's wearing his reading glasses. One and two and three and do 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 do. Wednesday. Boy, and what a Wednesday it's been. Oh, shit. I forgot to grab the picks of the week. Pardon me just for a moment. Hi. I'm back. It's been a day. I don't know if I've mentioned my cat. She's not exactly my cat. She's the store cat. There are two cats at the comic book store I work at. I suddenly find myself with a day off tomorrow, too, so I get to have a cup of coffee. It's almost 7. I want to stay up and read. Fucking nerd that I am. I'm now officially 3 weeks behind. I'll get back to the cats and I'll get back to the picks of the week. I have 2 days off a week, which I think is pretty standard. Look into that. And one of those days I'll usually spend reading, and then one of those days I'll usually spend watching movies or television. Usually when I'm high out of my mind. But even then, like there's days where I have a whole day to myself, and then that's all I'll do. There was a few Sundays like that last month. But then there's days where I'll read for a few hours, and then I'm like, all right, I think I'm done. You know. Also, I did start Maggie Haberman's new book, which I don't usually buy new books, especially not brand new. But despite how much I hate the former president, I will admit to being just utterly fascinated by how stupid and evil. I mean, there's no other way to describe him. And there's apparently no bottom. I mean, I know I'm not a genius for having figured that out if you've watched the news even once in the last 6 years or so. But, whew, anyway. 2 cats at the shop, whom I love very much. Shuri is the black one, and we are close, I would say, but we're not, she doesn't really, we don't have like a rough and tumble relationship. Pugsley and I, on the other hand, are extremely close, and I've come to think of her as my cat. She is absolutely adorable. Everyone who comes in the store falls in love with her, and she can't get enough of it. But her nose was bleeding today, and I was about to lose my fucking mind. So I took her, there's a apparently not very good vet across the street, so I took her there, and they gave her some stuff. She should be fine, but blech. I find pretty much everything completely exhausting. More emotionally than physically, because, you know, walking to the bus stop is about all the physical, but everything is just exhausting. So I spent an hour at the vet's with the cat until my boss came over and relieved me, and it felt like I had been running a marathon. So naturally, I forgot to bring the pics of the week in here before I started rolling the camera. Get off my back. All right. First up this week is Kaya, #1. Kaya, I can't hear that name without thinking of the 1987 film Willow. This is written and drawn by the great Wes Craig, who is the artist on Rick Remender's Deadly Class. Well, it's Remender and Craig's Deadly Class, which is one of the finest books to come out of Image or of anywhere in the last, I guess 10 years? Yeah, that sounds about right. I don't know much about this. It looks like, and there is something to this, I think, when an artist goes off on his own, because I think this is the first thing Wes Craig has written, but when an artist does something like this, like a solo project, they tend to, I find, what I've noticed is that they tend to go into the fantasy genre because there's a lot more fun stuff to draw. But beyond that, I don't know much about this. I know it'll look great, though, because Wes Craig is a tremendous artist. Also this week, Hulk number 999. It's been a while since I've read an issue of the Hulk, which is why I've taken it for a pick of the week this week. The last arc was Banner of War, which was Hulk versus Thor. And to be honest with you, it's been a few months now, or at least one or two. I don't remember how it ended, but this is the start of a new arc, Hulk Planet, which is an inverse of Planet Hulk, which was a storyline from 2006 into 2007. I want to say that's right. Yeah. Yep. 6 into 7. I think it's maybe 7 into 8. And I don't know if it's on that in that storyline that the Hulk finds himself on the planet Sakaar, and he has a lot of adventures there. Sakaar was the planet featured largely in Thor Ragnarok, and the oh shit, what's his name? Jeff Goldblum's character in Thor Ragnarok is based on one of Marvel's kind of cosmic eternal characters, conceptual, like eternity and eternity, infinity, chaos, order, the in-betweener. I still can't pull this fucker's name. The champion, right? That's one. The Collector, who was featured in one of the Guardians of the Galaxy movies, as portrayed by Benicio del Toro. He's another one. And now I can't remember Jeff Goldblum's character's name. Sheesh. You know, my boss was drilling me because he didn't know what Bullseye's real name was. He's like, they never said what Bullseye's real name is. And I said, no, it's Lester. They never said his last name. Although for some reason I think it might be Lester Dent. And then he said, well, who's Electro? I can't remember Electro's name. I said, that's Max Dillon. And he said, oh, yeah, well, what's MODOK's name? And I said, George Tarleton. And then he said, how do you know this stuff? Which is a question I'm asked often. And my standard answer is, why don't you know this? Don't put it on me because I know something. You're the dummy. If I know something and you don't know something, that means I'm smarter than you, at least in that much of a regard. And as a smart guy, I've noticed this is a big tactic from people who otherwise might be very smart, but they give into this tactic of like, well, you big nerd. My boss, who owns a comic book store, has a Carl Sagan quote tattooed on him. Calls me a nerd often. All right. I was in more punk bands than he was, though. So who's the nerd now? What was I talking about? I can't remember the fucking character's name. Anyway, that character, I was only bringing it up to say that character was not in the comics at all. On Sakaar, in Planet Hulk, he does become a gladiator. That's really the only similarity between the two stories. I think this is going to go back to Sakaar, but I don't know. I just wanted to read a Hulk book because it's been a few months. And also, since I'm so behind, I didn't want to start anything new, something that might tie into the Judgment Day storyline or something like that because I haven't gotten that far. And good. 8 minutes in, could be 3. This could have been an email. Also, Beware the Eye of Odin number 4. This actually came out 2 weeks ago, but believe it or don't, it actually got right past me. I have as you I'm sure are aware, I have a meticulous system for what comics I get every week. And I basically write them out. I look up online what's coming out on Wednesday. On Saturday, I look at what's coming out on Wednesday. I write down the ones I want. They come in, I double check. I check my list twice. This is from my time working at the North Pole, I learned that. And it's still, sometimes things get through. So I missed this from a couple weeks ago. It's also, like these other two, safely, like I've read every issue of Beware the Eye of Odin so far, so I'm not going to like spoil something for myself, because aside from these picks of the week, I have to read everything in chronological order. It's what makes me happiest, and I'm sick of you standing in the way of that, by God. And if I want to go back to grad school, then I will. Nobody's asking me to go back to grad school. Certainly not me. All right. So as usual, I did read. Excuse me. This is my new look now. Insane librarian. I got rid of my progressives. I don't know if I mentioned that. Long story. And now I have 7 different pairs of reading glasses stashed in various places where I might be reading. That's what my life has become. First up from last week, Hell is a Squared Circle. This is great. Great fun. Pretty much, I mean, nothing... How do I say this without sounding shitty? It was what I expected. It was what I wanted. And I got what I wanted. And it was good. I do really feel like it's silly that they're like, oh, wrestling noir, we just came up with that. No, you still haven't, but do more of it. I mean, I'm certainly into it. That's, I think most of these are kind of like that. It might be, and it happens too. As much as I love comics, sometimes I just get bored with them. And sometimes they're boring. I will say that. When I started collecting again in earnest was in late 01, and I've not stopped since. I'd started in 1988 as a kid, kind of dropped off in the mid 90s, 95, 96, came back post 9/11, thanks Osama bin Laden, and haven't looked back. And when I came back, it was very similar to when I went back to college. When I graduated high school in 1995, and I'm not doing the Fred Willard thing. I completely lost where I was going with that. It doesn't matter. Who gives a shit? Oh, that's what it was. I graduated high school in 1995. I immediately began to drop out of community college for the next 5 or 6 semesters. And then, yeah, that's about right. When I was 22 or 23, maybe. Yeah, I went back to school full time. And then I loved it. That was why I kept dropping out. In high school, I was pretty well behaved. I mean, I was a young punk rocker, but I never got in trouble at school. I think I might have gotten detention once or twice in the 4 years, if that. I got a couple talkings to for objectionable t-shirts that I wore to school. But yeah, I was a pretty well-behaved kid. Because I knew if I didn't behave, I'd get the shit kicked out of me when I got home. So, tends to make you toe the line a little bit. I mean, I guess that's the point. Severe, lifelong psychological damage be damned. So then, as I've always been completely ambitionless and directionless, it was like, well, I guess I'll go to college. Even though I didn't give 2 shits about it. But then I got out of school, and then it was like, hey, if I don't show up to class, nobody's going to call my parents. So the getting the shit kicked out of me is no longer a threat. So yeah, I just fucked around. Did all the fucking around I should have been doing in high school. But when I went back, and this would have been right around the same time I started collecting comics again, I found that I was like, oh, now that I'm here voluntarily, it's like I needed to get some partying out of my system, like for reals. And so from the ages of, 18 to 23 or so, I was drunk. I was drunk for all of college too, but I still managed to get pretty goddamn good grades, if I do say so. Because I was there under my own volition. I wasn't there out because my parents were making me. I wasn't there because I didn't have anything better to do. I wasn't there because I wasn't even really there to get a degree. Honestly, when I went back to college in my early 20s, I just wanted to be smarter than everybody else. So far, so good. I just really, and it sounds like bullshit. I had been working at a 7-Eleven for a few years at this point, and I definitely did not want to have that job anymore. But any real long-term plans that I've ever had have only gone to shit, which, I don't know why people even bother. But it was a similar thing to comics. When I was a kid, I loved comics, and then I got into high school, and I started being more critical of things and started being a little more selective in what I read, and it was a very bad time for superhero comics, so I had to rethink all that. It took me 5 or 6 years. But then when I came back, I was like, oh, now I'm back. Now that I've taken a break. I saw something where Evan Dorkin said as much. I don't remember where. It might have been an interview in a fanzine, or it might have just been in one of his own like editorials in his comics. But he mentioned, or it might have even been on Twitter, but he said something to the effect of like, you just need to walk away from it every now and again. Go do something else. Which personally has never been a problem. I think comics are probably the main thing that I spend time on, but far from the only thing. And I have a lot of very intense passions for many things, as long as they don't, as long as I don't accidentally make any money doing them, I'm into it. So I got back to the comics in late '01, and it's really only been 20 years later that I'm kind of like starting to be a little like, maybe I need to. I'm not going to stop, God no. But I have been very selectively like dropping books and being a little more like, I can't just keep getting comics out of momentum. I gotta, enjoy them. It's just the sort of thing you have to kind of come to terms with every now and again. And I know it sounds like a lot of bullshit, but for one thing, I have a degree in philosophy, and for another thing, I think if more people thought about this sort of thing, they'd be better off. Like, fandom is rife with dudes who probably don't really like comics anymore. It's like teachers, just for one example. My mother was a teacher. I know several teachers. Several of my friends are teachers. And of course, I had a lot of teachers growing up. And I think you know as well as I that you can probably put them into three groups. There's teachers who love their job and are good at it. Even if they're not good, they love it, so they make up for it. Then there's ones that are shitty at it and seem to me just to get off on being bullies. And I think this starts to slide into this other group, and this might be, in fact, the entire second group. So fuck what I know, but I always feel like there's so many teachers out there who like decided when they were young that they were going to be a teacher, and they went through all this school, and Jesus Christ, there's so much to do, and then you get there and these kids are savages, and then you got to go buy your own goddamn school supplies for these kids that you fucking hate. And then you got to deal with your principals and all that office politics bullshit. Can you imagine having to deal with office politics and a bunch of savage children? Oh, I don't like either of them, so I don't work at a place where you do either. And they just, it starts to wear them down, and then they just become these bitter old fucks with tenure. And whenever I had a teacher like that growing up, I was like, honey, you need to think about your next chapter, I think. I don't think this is for you anymore. But they put so much time and energy into it that they're just like, well, I can't. I mean, that's also, I feel, clearly I'm not living the high life. But that's kind of why. In order to be a success in this country anyway, or so as far as I can tell, you have to really work hard at something that is not really worth it. And I saw that when I was a kid growing up, and I went, you know what, I'm going to just try to live a life with as little responsibility as I can. I don't know. I'm not in the best place I've ever been, but I'm not in the worst either. And there's a lot of comic book collectors like that. And I hear them in the store all the time. I mean, even my boss, who still, will read at least one a week just to have something to recommend. He's like, admittedly, like, I just don't even really read comics anymore. And I don't blame him. This is why I like working for him and not running that shop myself, because it would wear on you. But I feel like with just regular comic book collectors, especially the ones that are just pissing and moaning about everything, and I will grant you, there don't seem to be as many of them in this shop than at the one I worked at previously. But that one still looms pretty large for me. That whole experience of working in that particular shop. This is a much different shop. It's obviously similar in a lot of ways. Jesus Christ. Well, I don't really have much to say about these. This was fun. Bruce Campbell writing a zombie story. It's what you wanted. What I wanted and what I got. This was also good. The progenitor in this storyline is judging everyone one by one, and he appears to them as people that they know usually. And Tony passes, which is one of the things I do like about Iron Man, the Tony Stark character, is that Tony Stark, and this was definitely, I mean, it was already the case before the movies, but once the movies came out, this was definitely locked in, where Tony Stark's kind of a piece of shit, but what redeems him every time is that he doesn't stop. He really is doing his best. And that's good. Even though I didn't show this last week, I did read this. Bloodshot Unleashed #1. The new Bloodshot series. And I want to say that the premise is the same as every other Bloodshot series, and I still don't care. Because it's super violent, and I dig it. Bloodshot, if you're unfamiliar, is like a man-made soldier, and his entire body is infected, I guess you could say, with nanites, nanotechnology. They use the word nanites, which is also... there were nanites on the sci-fi era of Mystery Science Theater. So every time they mention Bloodshot's nanites, I picture those puppets. That's a very deep cut. But they rebuild him. So he's unkillable. And it's like Wolverine, but like a much faster healing factor. And he wants nothing more than to die. And in this storyline, there are a bunch more weapons like him, and not the Weapon X program. I want that clear. It's Operation Rising Spirit, or Project Rising Spirit, some dumb name like that. Rising Spirit is definitely... so a bunch of those guys have escaped. Now Bloodshot has to go kill them all. Done. It's written by Dennis Camp, who is a newer name that I've seen around, but this is the first thing I've actually read. And it's drawn by John Davis Hunt, who I couldn't remember where I knew his name from, but then I looked it up. And I think the only thing I've read by him was The Wildstorm, which was a series from a few years ago by Warren Ellis. And okay, good. I derailed myself with the whole thing, and now I can probably stop. I apologize for being... You watch me become over-caffeinated in real time. But, you know... Oh, I can't see anymore.